Good. Well, I'd like to introduce the panel. I am Noah Smith. I'm the CEO at Common Media. We started the business in 2007. My academic background's in machine learning and data mining. I started the business as a developer and quickly decided that I really enjoyed solving business problems as much as I enjoyed solving technical problems, which I think is a common thread for a lot of folks here. We merged with a local Drupal shop. You probably saw me chatting with Al a few minutes ago. He had a little shop called RVTC that joined us in 2012, and that really kickstarted our sea change from a Ruby on Rails sort of startup and publishing agency into more of a digital object repository and business intelligence working group. So that's my backstory. I can fill you in more on what Common Media does, but this panel is not about me, so I'd like to dive in and introduce the panelists. So I think everybody here knows Kelly. Kelly's the founder of Left Click and Last Call. He has an academic background in philosophy, I'm told, which I'm sure serves him well. And his technological background is as a systems administrator and a Drupal PHP developer. He's a regular presenter and organizer at Drupal meetups, camps, and conferences, and of course, the executive director of Nerds. Kelly, do you want to tell us a little bit about Last Call and perhaps Left Click as well?
Oh, okay. So Left Click does computer repair, break-fix repair, as well as business, IT, networking, and server support. They're an Apple-authorized warranty repair center. There are 2 locations in Amherst and Northampton, and not too involved in that business right now, but I help them when I need it. And Last Call is an increasingly full-service agency. We started out as a dev shop, doing the tough, complicated things well. And then we built out and refined our project management from there, and our design team, and we're doing a lot of strategy and information architecture jobs.
Thank you. Which is really cool because the strategy piece kind of pulls me back to some of what I was interested in with philosophy, a lot of brand identity and just communication, basically communicating clearly what is your content strategy and what is the architecture of what you're trying to say. Is it logical? Does it make sense? Is it consistent? And so it's been really cool to be involved in that work, and I feel like my degree is coming back into play, which is always a question or concern of people that I tell what my degree in college was. So now it's easier to put them at ease.
Terrific. Well, thanks, Kelly. Over here on the end is Chris Amato. He's the founder of Knectar and the principal. He has an academic background in geology, which I'm sure he was...
comes into play every day.
Every day. He previously described his pre-Knectar technical background as an Excel jockey and a .NET coder, and but now I believe you do mostly solutions architecture and sales and strategy.
And team building.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I would be remiss to neglect to mention that you're the product designer and manager for Piston as well.
Thanks.
So if you saw Chris's talk just before this, I think you can see how skilled he is in those areas. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Knectar?
Briefly, we are primarily a dev shop, very project manager-centric approach to projects. Distributed team, we're about 15 or so. We work mostly with universities and agencies as kind of sort of their technical support, augmenting their in-house teams with solutions architecture, primarily Drupal development, also Magento enterprise level work as well.
Terrific. Thank you. John, second from the end. John Eckman is the CEO of 10up. He's been there for a couple of years, but has a long history in web development agency, principal consultant at Molecular, director of development at Pixel Media, senior director at Opteros, and then managing director at iSight. Before that, you had a previous career in academia, in as a professor of English, is that right?
Yeah, I was going to say it's a common thread. So I did a PhD in American Lit and taught at the University of Washington in Seattle, which also comes in handy every day. As people who saw my last talk just before this was all about urban planning as a model for web design. So it does actually come in useful.
Terrific. I think Kelly's been toying with some sort of a tagline for this conference that involves the phrase accidental techies, and I think to some extent we all are. John has a blog at openparenthesis.com. John, do you want to tell us a little bit about 10up? You've been on quite a trajectory.
So 10up is a 4-year-old, 125-person, fully distributed, full-service agency. So we do design, strategy, engineering, and support. Primarily focused on WordPress as a platform, and our employees are literally distributed throughout the world. A couple are speaking at WordCamp Cape Town this weekend in South Africa, Ukraine, Philippines, Portugal, United Kingdom, Germany, France, Brazil, Mexico, US, and Canada, I think is the full set. And so we mostly work with large media companies, people like Time, AMC, TechCrunch, ESPN, and then what I like to say is brands that operate like media companies, so NGOs, universities that are doing a lot of content publishing, and spend a lot of time in the community. I have spent the last 5 years mostly in Drupal, WordPress, and Sitecore, and now I'm fully devoted to WordPress as a platform.
Yeah, I neglected to mention you're a founding organizer at WordCamp Boston, which is terrific. Thank you. Jackie Fallon, second to your left, is a founding principal at Fit Staffing, which I believe you started in 2005. Mm-hmm. Before that, you had an academic background in marketing and a technical background as a systems engineer at IBM. She's a board member at Western New England University and many other local nonprofits, and very impressive. She's also active because of the focus of FIT, I believe, with the .NET user groups in Western Mass and Connecticut. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about FIT?
Sure. We're FIT, which stands for Fallon Information Technology. It's not a fitness company. So we finally did change our name this past winter to Fit Staffing so people knew what we actually do. So we're a staffing company based in Springfield, focused mostly in the Western Mass area and down into Connecticut, placing people, as he mentioned, a lot on the developer side, programmers, application developers, web developers, and the like, as well as the infrastructure side, placing network administrators, system administrators, help desk, and all the way up into CIO level positions. So all we do is IT. We do contract placements, so any independent contractors out there, if you're ever looking for a gig, we can help with that, as well as working as pure recruiters for our clients. When they want to hire someone full-time, we help in that regard as well. And if anybody doesn't know what this was, because it took us a while, it was in your bags. It's actually a screen cleaner for your phone, and you pull this out and it can be a holder for your phone.
Oh, I was wondering that.
It took us forever to figure out, and we ordered them. We knew it was a phone holder, and we're like, So, good to meet everybody.
And if you ever want to clean your glasses without taking them off, it's kind of it works pretty good.
What if they're dirty on the other side?
That doesn't happen.
Then you have to take them off.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Jake DelHagen is the Director of Technology at Big Voodoo Interactive. He's also joining us from the Springfield area. Did I pronounce it properly?
You did. That's perfect.
Excellent.
Excellent.
So Jake started with JavaNet in 1996, which anybody who was in the Valley at the time will remember. And then, of course, founded Techistry the year after that, which was merged into Zenbu in 2004. And then in 2011, he became the Director of Technology at Big Voodoo Interactive, which he describes as a startup. Do you still describe it that way?
I would say we're a very successful startup. Our sister company makes TV commercials nationally, the Marquis Solomon commercials, a lot of PI. We're a vertically integrated media company. Basically, we have a digital component and a TV component. The digital side, we focus exclusively on legal. And again, like with ESPN, we take the media and we merge them. We're primarily, WordPress core, We do the same things any developer agency would do. We build the platforms, we test them, we want them safe. And because we're dealing with attorneys, there's a lot of safety issues, there's bar rules. It's not just a simple website, it's actually compliance issues across the country.
Sure.
But a little beyond a startup now.
Yeah.
We're at 16 people and probably another 15 that circulate around us.
Terrific. Thank you. So my vision for the panel today was that we would take 6 different topics, 5 plus the introductions, and sort of give each about 10 minutes. I have a few prepared questions in each section. I'd like to ask 2 or 3, and anybody who has something they want to jump in with on the panel is welcome to. And then before we move on to the next topic, I'd like to ask for audience questions just in the course of conversation here. So I'd like to start with business growth. And the first topic I would pose is, how has your business changed its organizational structure as it's grown? I think we have a range of business sizes here, and perhaps Jackie can speak from the consulting side as well as how you've seen folks looking to recruit as their businesses grow. John's order of magnitude above the rest on the panel here, but I'm sure the same lessons apply. So I'm interested if anybody would like to start us off.
So we started as an LLC, and I was a sole owner, member, whatever they're called. And we recently changed to a corporation, an S Corp within Massachusetts, and probably should have done it sooner rather than later for various reasons, but we just did that last year. I think, to speak to your specific question, working with independent contractors, it's difficult. We have the tightest regulations for independent contractor rules here in the state of Massachusetts, throughout the country. So they tried to make it very difficult to hire and place people on a 1099 basis. So we do have to do a lot of W-2s because they want their piece of the action is probably the biggest reason they want to do that. But we do business in Connecticut, and Connecticut's getting tight as well. So I'd be happy to talk to any of you if you're deciding what to do, 1099 versus W-2. There's a lot of catches there that can really bite you when it comes to tax time.
Yeah, and John and Chris, I know you both hire internationally as well. Are there aspects of that you'd like to touch on?
Yeah, so as 10up Brew in the US, we work with a company called TriNet, which is a POE. It's an outsourced employment agency. It's or co-employment. What that means is all of our employees are W-2'd employees to TriNet, but they work at our behest. So what that helped us do is be able to hire people in all 50 states without having to worry about local regulation, right? So that whole problem of sort of, if I hire a developer in Vermont and a developer in Florida, and now I got to deal with different tax regulations and all that, TriNet handles all of that. Outside the US, our folks are independent contractors. Because we don't have a legal agency in the countries in which we're hiring, they're basically 1099 contractors.
We use ADP Total Source in a similar way. Did 10up consider that? Is what you're using better?
I feel like TriNet is a more comprehensive solution, at least when we looked at it, because it's also benefits administration and payroll, and we felt like they were able to help us negotiate better deals than we would have gotten as a 20-person company. Now that we're 120, frankly, it's time for us to start looking at whether we just go out on our own and use a broker and go direct.
Yeah,
sure.
But that's 10th on my list of 5 things I can worry about.
I can say some things about how Last Call has grown. In 2010, we were a team of maybe 3 or 4, and I think that roughly doubled each year. And from one perspective, that seems like quick growth, but on the ground in the trenches, it feels like we hire people very slowly. Whether it's the right way to do it or not, it feels like we get work until the team is stressed where we're overbooked, and then we bring someone on to relieve that. And I'll say over the years that hiring a new person, it's always risky because you're as a business owner, you're promising that we're not just going to have to let you go right away. We're bringing you on because there's the work, and we're being responsible with that. And every single time, knock on wood, you bring someone on, and within a week, they're slammed with work. It's almost like the work just is ready to fill the fill the plate of the person that you just hired. So yeah, we feel like we hire very slowly, but every time we hire someone, we just need more people.
Just a different aspect of this question is the question of like, as you grow, if you're small, like if you're going from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, or 8, I guess is the pattern. The roles change, individual roles. My role has changed. Junior slowly becomes more senior. Responsibility maps change. And that change can be challenging for everyone because it means learning and means sort of embracing the risk that kind of is implicit with learning. So that's an interesting thing that it's become, we're kind of restructuring now, and it's like come into highlight, like even though things can be painful because you're so busy, you're like, oh, can't keep up. Yeah. Well, that sucks. Well, let's hire someone or let's restructure to alleviate that kind of issue. Sounds good. Oh, okay. But it also means we're all going to need to change. And so an approach that we've taken, or we're actually right in the middle of it, is like everybody's basically like coming up with an idealized responsibility map, a pie chart. Here's what, like right now, it's like I'm at something like 60% solutions architecture production work that needs to come way down. Right. Well, who's going to make up the slack? Next people. So it's a cascade effect of, and that's how we're doing it, is sort of thinking about what do we want our map to look like, our pie chart to look like, and now we can start to form a strategy of how to do it.
Yeah, Jake, I'm curious if from that sort of startup background, I'm sure there was an original business plan that laid out, like there's a professional sales team over here and development. Like, has that changed over time as you've grown, or has that held?
Drastically changed. So from developers, because it's a developers conference, I see the industry commoditizing very rapidly, especially as the arts and technology start to blend, where you have your big media companies finally getting into technology. Yep. And that's kind of the convergence where it hits. So I specifically established overseas teams to do the non-thinking work, and it's highly laid out in documentation. And the US people we hire, we specifically use for creative and data analysis and more complex integration. So that's changed rapidly over the last 3 years. Sales-wise, it's the same thing. We are finally starting to see a point where, as the last speaker said, how much is a website to now that they actually have infrastructure, they've kind of made some of those mistakes, and they understand they're not just buying a website, they're actually buying a huge framework that can cost their company. So it's a commoditization, but the U.S. market of people is the creative market. It's the thinking is what we do really well. So that's what we're seeing mostly.
It's interesting. We sometimes get this question at TENUP because we also hire internationally, and I'm always very careful to say we don't have offshore resources because there's no shore for us to be off, right? There is no remote because there's no center. We're deliberately distributed, just like a fully distributed network. And our goal from the very beginning, Jake Goldman, who founded the company, is a good friend of mine, was to be able to hire the best people wherever we find them. Yeah. So we don't differentiate. A web engineer that happens to be in Pune, India has exactly the same responsibilities as one who's in New York or San Francisco. Sure. The goal is to find the smartest people wherever they happen to be and do as much non-commoditized work as we can across the entire stack. And it's a very different kind of model. We've gone through a number of inflections from a structure perspective, as you can imagine. The most significant of which was at around 45 or 50, where we switched to a pod structure. I can go on for hours about pod structure, but basically in a traditional agency matrix, your engineers report to an engineering manager, your designers report to a design manager, and then they're assigned to projects. Our model inverts that, so our staff work in pods, which are 10 to 15 person multidiscipline teams headed by a project manager and team lead, and they work on a set of clients together. And those pods are geographically independent. They might be from all over the world. And they work on a set of 4 or 5 clients together, and they include designers and developers and project managers and audience and revenue strategists and systems engineers and all the other roles. And that way we feel like there's a stronger kind of allegiance to our goal is to solve the customer's problem first and think about our discipline second, as opposed to think about our discipline first and then solve customer problems second. But it makes for a very interesting challenge of resourcing, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
New projects come in, what pod has capability, what pod has availability? Do we transfer people between pods in order to make the resourcing work? Or do we keep people in pods so that they build loyalty to their small team that they know and love? And that's just a constant ongoing shuffle.
That's a really interesting point to me as somebody who runs a 16-person company. The fact that you essentially return to the structure that I probably have now, to have, a couple dozen of those on your
Yeah,
staff.
we technically never left pods. We had sort of just a flat team.
Yeah.
And then it divided into two teams, the red team and the black team, literally. And then we divided into 4 pods, and now we have 10 pods. And now we're starting to have some pods that are more specialized, that focus kind of on onboarding new employees or focus on specific kinds of clients. And we're starting to almost have a practice model, like from a law firm, where sort of you have a group of professional services people who have knowledge in a given area, and they become a pod.
That's very interesting.
Red team and black team. What do we have? Team Jelly and Team Jam. The last call. Yeah.
So now we have A Team, Keyboards of Fire, Orca, Phantom, Space Pod, Voltron, and I'm missing at least one. They're going to kill me for it.
Any follow-up from the audience?
So
Oh, I'm sorry. There's a
Gotta
microphone.
be Mike.
Thank you, Nick.
my question, is that working? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Have you given any thought to what the ideal size of an organization is, and then do mergers play a part in that? I mean, like we've seen a bunch in the Drupal community lately where some shops are starting to roll up, and I just wonder, should we all be getting together and working, and it seems, because it does seem, as Kelly said, that the work is there. So is it harder to merge than it is just to hire more developers? Everyone seems to be clawing for the great developers out there. And so I guess, what's the ideal size and what's the best strategy to get there?
We've gone through a couple of merging conversations, and I'm still open to it. It's challenging though, because you're basically merging cultures,
Right.
And the mapping can be really tricky. That's the short version.
Yeah, we've actually acquired some firms and had acquisition talks with others or merger talks with others. The culture issue is always the stopping point, and the ideal size of the organization, it's funny, it's something we talk about a lot. To me, that is like, how long is a piece of string? It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. The answer I tend to give is we want to keep getting bigger because we feel like we can have more impact, but we want to preserve our quality of work and our quality of life. And so we will continue to keep growing. There's actually a site called is10uphiring.com that just says yes, because we're known in the WordPress community that we're always trying to grow our team with the right people, and we feel like we can confidently find the work for them to do. So for us, it's been historically better to just keep growing ourselves than to try to merge with other orgs. But we have done it if there's some pocket of special skill or some other reason that makes that more compelling. If you look across the board, there's a great book called Decisive by Dana Chapith. You look across the board at mergers, it's a horribly bad idea for big companies to merge with each other. I mean, it just across the board statistically is more likely to lead to a downgrade in both companies' performance than it is to lead to success. That doesn't mean it's always going to happen that way, but it's a lot harder than it looks to just merge two orgs.
And it's never a merge. It's someone eats someone else. To call it a merge is never.
Merge is the polite name for an acquisition.
Yeah.
Right. That's where the conversation gets tricky, where it's like, well, whose logo are we going to use?
Yes.
And then it's like, or are we going to come up with a new thing? And is that new thing we come up with going to be better than the two that we've been each independently building over the years? And then it's just like, all right, I got to get back to work.
When my wife and I got married, we actually talked about making up a new last name, right, that we could both take instead, and then we just kept our own.
Oh, that's a fantastic branding project right there.
I can tell you, what we've been doing is like with Esperdyne Technologies locally, Aspen Studios in Florence, and in fact, I was thinking of even engaging Knectar as one of the things. We've been doing long-term heavy contracts with them, and I find that we want to support the local valley for one, and that's the most effective strategy for us. Multi-year contracts that we actually integrate teams, and we decide. We make sure we're not competing with each other, obviously, but provided that's the case, that seems to work locally because talent is very thin.
Yeah, I think every time you get bigger, the challenge of staying efficient shifts slightly, and the way that you stay efficient takes a different solution. And I think I haven't seen. I'm impressed with how Last Call has grown, and I feel like we're pretty super efficient. But as Left Click grew, it was a lot of hierarchies developed, and it started to become harder to sense that efficiency of when I was working there more, and we were a small team, and everybody wore all the hats, and we just all got the stuff done. And versus when they got up to like 15 people, then it seemed like there were a couple extra layers of delegators delegating things to other people to delegate things to. So
it's funny how much that perspective is different. So to me, 10 up at 120 people is a small business, right? It's a small agency. Digitas is 5,000 people, right? Accenture is 50,000. Like, we're a very small company. And so in the WordPress space, sometimes people will talk about us as this big agency, and I have to sort of laugh and say, we're not, like one of my developers actually said, I worry that we're becoming Microsoft. And I was like, no sense of how to far away.
You needed to do one of those like solar system order of magnitude drawings.
I mean, 120, is 120 people big? I guess it depends on where you look at it from. To me, we're still very small.
If I could turn the focus a little bit towards sales here to keep the conversation moving. The question I would pose is, what are the characteristics of a good project, and how do you what do you do pre-contract to ensure that a job will go well? Chris just spoke on this, I think. And sort of following up to that, how do you keep your pipeline full of those good projects? Would anybody like to dive in?
Hope.
Hope? Yeah.
Nope.
Well, I'll throw this one at you, Jake. Because you guys are in a specific content vertical, I imagine marketing plays a pretty strong role in that.
It's huge. Well, we have a strategic advantage that we have national actors, for one, but our number one rule is we never cold call. Our number two rule when engaging a client is that we make them call us 4 times to 5 times to weed them out at this point. And that's a luxury, I understand, but getting the wrong client is a disaster for your bottom line. So I suppose we create an expertise, and then we make people go through our process, and if they can't, we understand graciously and would rather not have them because they'll destroy your reputation.
Sure.
So
I can just echo that strongly, which is not having that luxury at this point. We actually spend a lot of time, the question of qualified client is so critical, and it just becomes more critical, especially when you're going from small, wide net to more mature, really clear on who your target audiences are and who your customer base is, and also like what comes with that in technology terms, in terms of what is your sweet spot in terms of like what is your ideal project. And without that, or the opposite of that, when you're not doing that, what the problem is can be severe, not just in terms of like you make money or you don't, that's sort of a secondary thing. It can be severe in the sense that you're really reinventing your business process around the idiosyncrasies and range of less qualified clients. So if you're taking like massive budgets and tiny budgets and this technology, you're needing to realign your process, agile partners, non-agile partners. There's just so many variables that if you're not winnowing in a healthy, positive way, choosing the thing that you're best at and really focusing on that as a strategy, you're constantly being pulled in different directions, and that kind of like you can lose your focus, and it affects everything. It affects recruiting, it affects marketing, it affects identity. So can't agree enough.
Yeah, I think we take maybe a slightly different approach, which may sound a little kumbaya, but definitely differentiating, being known for a niche. We're WordPress.com VIP partners. We get a lot of business from being on that list, so people know that we build large-scale sites. Definitely all referral-based, all inbound, all make your reputation at doing something that you're good at, and you'll find more of that work.
Yep.
When it comes to qualifying, though, we're very careful to say, we don't say no to clients. We define the conditions under which we think the project can succeed, and then they decide whether that works for them. Maybe that sounds like a distinction without a difference.
No.
It actually is very helpful, especially I've found as training new, what we call senior web strategists, our accounts people. I know in theory we're qualifying people out of our funnel, but I don't want them to think of it that way. We're very careful that we have a form on the 10up site and people fill it out to submit requests, and we respond carefully and thoughtfully to every single one of them. And it's important that that comes across not as, oh, you're too small for us, we don't want to talk to you, but as, here's the way that we would approach your project. And a lot of that can be boilerplate, it's recurring, right? But here's how we would approach your project, and here's typically what a range that would cost. And then they may decide, right, this person who filled out the form and said, I want to build Facebook for $500,
Yeah.
will self-qualify out, but we haven't said your idea is crazy or you're nuts. We've said, here's how we would approach it, right?
Yeah, we say a lot of our processes are complex and involved and rigorous and maybe too expensive.
Yep.
You know? But yeah, sometimes you still do get that tough client who wants to pay to treat you like crap, and then we manage that internally.
I think this is a very important distinction, though, between two types of technological firms or agencies. So they're probably taking a broad spectrum of customers. We do not, and we have to. There's just like any industry, like if you're dealing with a surgeon in the medical, you know the surgeons that are frankly doing malpractice, or you know the really good ones. So we have to be extremely careful. So it's, again, you don't pre-qualify them, but depending on where you go, you do need to think of your expertise, because our reputation is all we have, including legal and bar rules on top of it, comply. So those are the two types of, I think, scenarios that are different between like an organization like ours or a general agency.
And I do want to touch back on what a luxury it is to do that, because if you're hungry and the only job that's there is, you know, the $900 site for the massage therapist, you know, 5 pages, you start thinking, well, I can get a 5-page site out, you know, but as your team grows and you learn the right ways to do things and the experts that you need focused on certain things, the projects that we're doing, you know, the sites that we do are probably in the $40,000 to $70,000 range on average. And I can still remember, you know, back in 2010 doing a $900 info site for a client. And so, you know,
And I think as you grow, that becomes one of those soul-searching moments of, is there somebody younger, hungry, or smaller coming up behind us who will undercut that project? And you just have to be okay with that.
Yeah,
just
like,
to say, there are enough of the, for us, $100,000, $500,000 projects out there.
Sell the expertise.
We don't have to chase the $50,000.
Not the low cost.
we've lost enough shirts. So someone else can lose the shirt. You gotta lose a bunch of shirts to get to where, you know, get there. Yeah.
Any follow-up from the audience? All right, we're still sort of catching up with being a little behind, so I guess I would like to again turn the focus, if there's no follow-ups, to marketing. And I guess we've touched on a lot of the questions that I had thought to ask, mostly involving the tightness of the focus of the agency. You can see there's a range here, but I guess maybe it's worth speaking a little bit on how do you convey that area of expertise, however tight that may be, and what sort of channels do you use to reach the folks that you're trying to reach?
So one of the things I'll jump in quickly from 10up's point of view that we did from the very beginning is heavily invest in the WordPress community. So Helen Hosandi, who's our Director of Platform Experience, is a full-time dedicated person who works on WordPress core and has been for the last 3 years. There's now actually 3.5 FTEs worth of people at 10up who just work on core full-time, and that's a dedication thing.
Wow.
But we also very early on, speaking at WordCamps, going to conferences, was very encouraged as a value. And there was a time in which any 10up employee who got accepted to speak at a WordCamp, we would cover their travel.
Yep.
We've softened that policy because since you have people everywhere, you don't want them all traveling to each other's towns every weekend. You actually want to encourage them to speak in their local community, so we do less of the travel.
Yeah.
But for us, really being closely identified with the platform and close to it was important. But from a marketing perspective, we were careful that the company name doesn't have WordPress in it. The homepage of 10up doesn't actually mention WordPress. From a customer-facing point of view, it's about working on open platforms and content management. And from a recruiting point of view, it's about making sure that people understand where we're coming from.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. We do almost the same thing with Drupal. The open source community is one in which you can get very involved in, and there are a lot of mechanisms in place that will show the rest of the community your involvement, so you can contribute back. The people who are using what you contribute back to can see that you're doing that. If you're contributing back with a presentation, people can come and see you presenting. Anyone who's presented anything knows how much you need to know your stuff to feel comfortable to get up and present on it, and that's a way to get hired, and you get back a lot you get back what you put into the open source community.
What we found interestingly was customers weren't at these conferences, but in our proposals, when we could list all of the places that we are, and when
Yep.
they came to our site and saw that we were presenting, they found that compelling, even though they as clients weren't necessarily
Weren't
going
there,
to those
sure.
things, right?
Yeah.
We've found that who we believe to be our ideal client would be like a web manager, where they have their own team internally at a company with a budget that takes their web infrastructure seriously, and that web team knows what they're doing, and they just want someone to do the heavy lifting. Those companies send that person to the conferences, and we've made a lot of ideal clients that way. They find us, they can see that we know what we're talking about. They can see that we're very involved, so that's worked out well for us. And we've also made it's not the term, we're featured service providers, whereas you guys are VIP, WordPress core, we're featured service providers in the Drupal marketplace, and so Drupal has a great mechanism for showing your profile that how much work that you do, and it's really been a good thing for us.
Chris, I know you focus less on a specific technology and more on project management. Do you face this a different way?
We do focus less, but it's not open-ended. Like, we're not saying yes to any technology.
Sure.
It's really just Drupal or Magento, and then for the special scenario where there's, like, we've done some API work, it's more generic.
But you, like we, have long focused on the agency partnerships as our direct clients, and then the end clients are sort of sometimes their clients, but really a joint client.
Yep.
So you and I spend a lot more time than many, probably than the rest, going and making new friends among other agency
Yep.
owners and trying to come up with partnerships with communications agencies and so forth.
Yeah, and the beauty of that model, there's challenges with it, but the beauty of it is that from a sales and business development perspective, you're kind of sharing that
Right.
sales development effort.
Yep.
Yeah. And we actually often are brought to pitches in support of agencies to sort of like represent the technology and architecture side of the equation. So we augment the sales process from our agency partners.
From us, we typically will go to trade shows and certification shows. So that's our biggest, because in legal, bar, it's like medical, you have to get certified. We fall into probably the agency space that they're referring to as well. So we're kind of in the middle, where we'll deal with a lot of development houses and, engage. So sometimes we actually get clients from the development house, so we'll be like, hey,
Sure.
You're specialized here. We want to take care of X, but you guys, can you do the branding and such like that?
Yeah.
So for us, it's mostly shows, very similar. I'm a techie by heart, an open source nerd by heart, but the truth is we are a fully integrated agency, meaning high brand.
And Jackie, I imagine you do many of the same events, but from the other side.
Yeah, I was going to say, we definitely do a lot of marketing, but word of mouth is
Sure.
always one of our best resources of new candidates as well as clients. So we find a job, they tell 5 other people that we help find them that job, and that's how we get a lot of candidates. And that's why we go to a lot of the users groups to be involved in those and get to know people from the candidate side. And clients, it's also word of mouth. Once we do a good job for our clients, they send 5 other clients our way. So.
Any audience questions on marketing? All right.
I have a question that I'll ask myself and then answer it.
No.
One of the things that I think about sometimes is how I got started doing websites for clients, to the point where I could answer a question about how we market our services. I think it would have taken me forever to get to the point that Last Call's at if I didn't start as a computer technician. Because the average web job, when you're starting out, is $1,000 if you're lucky, and nobody wants to hire someone off the street for $1,000 to do anything. And so I was good at fixing computers, and you can fix a computer for on average $100. You know, you replace a hard drive or remove a virus, and that's what I was doing at first. And I slowly did more and more of that stuff for businesses to the point that they trusted me, and then they said, "Hey, do you know anybody that can do our website?" And I would say, "Oh, that's me." And so so you had that trust, so you had that foot in the door. And so then I would do $1,000 website here, and that grew to 2, and then then I had this small portfolio, and I built off of that. And I'm not sure how I would have done it otherwise, because I've seen a lot of people really try to be be a professional web developer and go and juggle those clients, and it's really hard to get started. So I don't think everybody in the audience is business owners like us. Like, we've been talking a lot about our perspective, but I was just answering that question in case somebody was thinking about, like, how do I market my services as somebody who's trying to get started?
Yeah, same experience. Yeah.
So I'd like to spend the last couple minutes talking about human resources, I think. And this is something where all of us struggle to find good people, to keep good people, to make sure everybody is in the best position to succeed. This is Jackie's whole business, so perhaps we can start with you.
Finally, we get to this topic.
Absolutely. So I know your business is facilitating people finding good people. Maybe you can talk to also keeping good people and helping careers transition because when you hire somebody, you don't necessarily expect to have them in the same role for 10 years.
Yes, obviously, it's on everybody's mind because of the difficulty in finding good resources, finding good technical resources. We work a lot with companies very dissimilar from this panel that don't know how to hire technical people. So we deal with a human resources person who gets thrown a job description and says, "Go find this person," and they have no idea what these acronyms mean. So we really like working with them because they may hire one technical person a year, and they don't know what that is like. And we, our best relationships are where they look at us as a partner to that process and help them with that process, and also help them get into a technologist's mind. And they are different, and you do have to incent them differently and treat them differently. And it's not always about the money, it's about working on the latest technology. So if you're still a VB shop, you're not going to grab the best and brightest out there. You have to think about that and really look at technology as a way to attract the technical people and stay up to date with technology so they're incented. And the best technical people, speaking to your changing careers and how to keep them motivated, the best technical people don't always make the best managers. So you need to have a career path. Back when I was with IBM, we did this. To move up in an organization, meaning make more money, you don't necessarily have to be a manager to do that. You add layers to incent people to stay technical, but still get to where they want to be monetarily.
Yeah, I think that may be the understatement of the panel. I mean, that notion that being good at writing code means you're good at leading a team of people who write code, which is not at all true, and something we struggle with still. I think, when we think about retaining people, part of it is sort of trying to have realistic expectations. So one of my early mentors, Howard Kogan, who was the COO at Molecular and now runs Communispace, said, "John, very few of us are going to retire from here," right? So this was at T-Vision circa 2001.
Yeah.
This is not the world we live in anymore, where somebody's going to be at the same gig for 20 years. So let's not set that expectation. We think more in 3 to 5 year timelines.
Yep.
And we have to recognize that some people are going to graduate from 10 up. They're going to move on because we've empowered them to do something better. And that's okay.
Yep.
Not that I want them to. I would love for them to stay forever. But we also have to sort of recognize some of that turnover is natural and healthy. And I've been at other agencies where there was such a focus on retention that I think it actually stunted growth.
Sure.
Because working with the same people for 15 years isn't necessarily the best way to advance your skills. You need to change. You need to see how other organizations operate and learn from them.
But the beauty of that what's implied is that you have a process that is robust and has longevity and isn't dependent on like the personality of one or two people.
Yes,
Yeah,
that
which
is
is
absolutely necessary.
it sort of forces that question in a good way. Yeah.
And I would say one of the things that we invested in, so when you're speaking back to the scaling question, you make decisions about where to invest in overhead. So every resource you add who doesn't bill clients is decreasing your effective margin at some level, right? No matter how wonderful they are, that happens. Recruiting manager, Christine, who's our recruiting manager now, I wish we had hired 6 to 9 months earlier than we did. We're all still, as an executive team, very involved in every hiring decision. We still interview people, we still do trials, we still are involved before we pull the trigger. But having someone who lives, eats, breathes, sleeps, how do I find and retain the best talent, was something we should have invested in much sooner, probably at 60 people instead of at 90 or 100.
It's unambiguously a job description.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely needed to happen.
And
And there
it
are probably other places we need to invest now that we'll realize 6 months from now we should have done.
And it takes away from your core and what you're good at. And, that's what we tell our clients. This is what we do. We interview people every single day. We know the talent that's out there. You give us a call, we can find what you're looking for, whereas if you start from scratch, it can be a nightmare.
Corey?
Can you guys touch on the health of the talent pool in this region and maybe the opportunity for someone who might not be in it yet, might be kind of hanging around, maybe I should learn this stuff because I can have a job by the end of this?
It's a buyer's market.
I was going to say, we don't actually have any employees in the Valley at the moment, so I'm coming from Boston. We actually hired one, and then she moved to Boulder, so now she's not in the Valley anymore. So I can't really speak to the local market. I can certainly speak to WordPress as a technology that's growing, and that if you learn PHP and WordPress and Drupal, you will find work, in my experience.
I'd also say that I know this is a Drupal conference. There's tons and tons of work out there for Microsoft.
Yeah, especially on the government side.
On the government side.
Yep.
And just smaller organizations tend to, I think, the open source tends to go to the governmental or educational, whereas small businesses tend to go to Microsoft. And we always have openings for C#, .NET, SQL developers. Java a little less so in this area. Java tends to be a lot more predominant in the Boston and New York area, but the Western Mass, there's only a couple of shops that do pure Java.
I would say the market, we aggressively recruit. One of the primary reasons I'm even here is I want to meet people, and I'll tell you one thing we're finding is that talent is really thin, but it's for a different reason than you might think. We see plenty of students, but we're seeing a lack of passion in the industry. And it's one of the flags that we have. Like, we like to see people that come to these things on a Saturday because they want to. And the rest, a lot of it can be trained, but one thing we've found, now I'm getting older, but if you don't love this industry, I don't know how you keep up.
Right.
So,
And that's not going to change once you get hired.
it's not going to change, and it's this is going kind of the HR. This is one of the things we struggle with a lot, is because we have legal and tech. Well, in the legal world, they're used to paralegals and they go in the box 9 to 5. In our world, you want more of a creative flow and an always learning. So I had an HR manager say, I can't go past 40 and go to a conference, 40 hours. I'm like, what? Never heard that in my life. I'm like, if they're not up at 10 o'clock at night reading the latest security patch, you probably shouldn't be in this business. So anyway, we're always hiring. We're always hiring. We always have 3 or 4 positions we can't fill. We try to go local. That's not always practical. Then we go to contract, and it's not a last resort, but we try to pull overseas the best we can. We're
Make sure you get into the auditorium and talk to the people at the tables. They're hiring.
And I don't put out a lot of things personally because, frankly, I want to meet someone.
Right.
I know it sounds silly, but the personality has to jive. It's
And that
it's
brings up
more
a
important.
great point of why people hire us, is they throw a job description out there and they literally get inundated with resumes from all over the world. And it is a personal, you do have a resume, but people hire people, so.
People hire people.
Yeah, they don't hire paper.
So we do, as a remote company, our hiring process, our interviewing process is somewhat unique. So we do a Google Hangout or a Zoom video chat
Yep.
Starts with what we call a culture interview with Christine, who really understands our culture and our community and where we operate, followed by code review if it's a technical position, or a PM exercise if it's a more PM position. People will typically have 3 or 4 interviews before they get hired, and if we're on the fence, we'll do a trial. We'll do a 1-month or a 2-month trial, which is a paid engagement, but it's a contract engagement, and then we'll decide whether they become full-time. We've moved away from that because we found 95% of the trials were succeeding, and so we just kind of have metered back and said, let's be a little more risk aggressive and make the hire when we think it's going to be successful.
We look into the community too, not just locally, but the open source community. You can see where people are contributing back, how they're contributing back. That's one place you can see that passion that I think, so if somebody's got a project, they've got something on GitHub, or they're working in the issue queue on Drupal, that's probably in their spare time, and they're doing that because they like to do that. And I think you can see that.
We look there too. I guess the one caution I would give, and Ash Dryden I know spoke about this last year, is that can result in less diversity in the point of view of sort of who has time to contribute to open source and who doesn't, is a shift. So we always talk about sort of code review. We want code samples for a development position. It's okay if those aren't public. It's okay if we have to sign an NDA and promise not to show those to anybody. Like, there are ways we can coach through it. Even in a worst case scenario, we'll give you an exercise, very simple 1-page write-up of a plugin for WordPress to go off and develop. That should take you 15 to 20 hours, and in some cases we'll even pay at some rate for that if we're really interested in the candidate, but we don't have something tangible to hand on to try to get folks who might have been interested in contributing but weren't able to because of their job or because of their condition.
Sure.
Or their
I
lifestyle.
think that's a really good point he's making. Personality is the first thing, but we also have a test, and it's essentially a couple of plugins, WordPress, we sometimes do Drupal, and we look for 2 things if it's useful. One is that you can do it, and 2, regardless, sometimes we throw in rules we know are stupid. And we look for that because we tend to see younger engineers like to reinvent the wheel. But what we like to see is that people can follow a program for 3 to 5 months and learn it, then contribute, because we find if you can't understand the organizational values, you're probably going to go off the rails at some point.
Yeah, and it's fun. I mean, I felt weird at first about kind of that test model because it felt almost tricky, but it's not. It's very realistic and practical, and it's not a test that's like deliberately asking gotcha questions or whatever. It's very much what you will do day in and day out, and it's the best way to find out whether you can actually do it is to ask you to show it.
I think when a lot of people think of that, they think of those, so the famous Google tests where they put you up on a whiteboard and they make you, initially made you code on a whiteboard, and then there was all these sort of...
fit in a 747.
Exactly, wacky problems like that. That's sort of fallen out of favor. I heard just a second. We have run over past our hour. I believe this is the lunchtime break. If anybody would like to hang out and keep talking, please do. But we won't be offended if anybody hops up. Heads
Yeah,
up.
you're supposed to be racing to grab your lunch and then to get it and eat it in the auditorium because we want as many people as possible. Jen flew out here from the West Coast, taking time out of her busy life. And is Jen in here?
What time is she starting?
1 p.m. So at 12:30, Al Nutilli and Nathan Kirschbaum are going to do more podcast antics and lead right into the introducing Jen at 1. So see you all in there.
Terrific. Well, thank you all.